Research students are required to present their research findings in a thesis by the end of their candidature. A thesis consists of an argument or a series of arguments combined with a description and discussion of the research that has been undertaken. The research is expected to make a significant contribution to the field of study. This does not mean that you need to revolutionize the field, even though some PhDs may. It means that you are expected to extend the knowledge in your area. You do this by critically reviewing the available literature and attempting to add an element of original research to the field. Theses come in various shapes and sizes. The components of many theses are similar, although their functions and requirements may differ according to the degree for which they are presented. The components of a thesis as well as their characteristics are set out in the rest of this video. The cover pages of a thesis include a large amount of information and are governed by the requirements of your institution. The front cover page should include the thesis title, candidate's name and qualifications, the degree aimed at, as well as the faculty, university, and the date presented for examination. The cover pages also usually include a declaration page that states that the material presented has not been used for any other degree, that all sources are acknowledged, and that ethics approval was received. Always make sure to check your institution's requirements. All theses should have a table of contents that lists all major divisions and subdivisions in the thesis and indicates the page on which they can be found. Usually, theses also have separate lists of tables of figures after the tables of contents. These help the reader understand the overall structure of the thesis and also helps the reader find information later. If your thesis includes a large amount of technical terms or abbreviations, it may be useful to include a glossary. After these initial pages, there is usually a list of acknowledgements to thank everyone whose support has been important for your work. The student supervisors usually receive the first vote of thanks, but this section is the least bound by convention, so you can speak from the heart. All theses include an abstract that summarizes the thesis, mentioning the aims and purposes, the focus of the literature review, the methods of research and analysis, the main findings, and the implications of the results. The abstract is usually placed after the cover pages, but before the main text of the document. The introduction chapter provides the background information and rationale for the research, so that the reader is persuaded that it will be useful and interesting. It usually also serves as a frame for which the reader reads the rest of the thesis. In this chapter, it is important to focus on the need for the research. The introduction chapter also usually presents the research questions and aims, and outlines the subsequent chapters of the thesis. Depending on the research topic, the introduction chapter may also present the researcher's personal motivation for conducting the research project. The literature review shows the reader or examiner that you are familiar with the issues and debates in the field, and highlights that there is an area in this field to which you can contribute with your research. It is important to remember to only discuss theory that is directly relevant to your research. This is the section where you reference the most, where your use of verb tense becomes very important in conveying subtle meanings, and where you must be aware of unwarranted repetition. This is also the section where plagiarism can become an issue if you do not effectively paraphrase and summarize. The theoretical framework section of a thesis presents an understanding of the philosophical framework within which you see, research, and view knowledge. In other words, this section discusses your ontology, epistemology, and research paradigm. You should also describe the theories and concepts that are used in the thesis and show how these theories and concepts are used to analyze the data and explain your findings in the rest of the thesis. The methodology or research design chapter presents a rationale for the methodological approach that you have employed in your research. In other words, this section describes and justifies the methods of research and analysis using literature. This section should also describe what you did for selection of site, participants, data gathering and analysis, and the steps taken to ensure ethical research practice, including issues of validity, reliability, and/or credibility. Past tense is a feature of this section, as you are describing what you did in the past. Remember that the methodology chapter is not just a description of various methods. Throughout your methodology chapter, you should clearly link every method specifically to your study. The results section presents the data and findings. There is no one right way to present your results. For example, some theses have 5 results chapters while others only have 1. You should work with your supervisors to find the way that makes the most sense for your particular study. This section is also usually written in past tense. The discussion section should be written to draw your findings together and link them to the wider field. You should draw out your main achievements and explain what your findings mean. You should make links between aims, findings, and the literature, but you should be careful not to simply repeat what you stated in the earlier sections of your thesis. The final concluding chapter should leave the reader with a strong sense that the work you set out to do has been completed and that it was worthwhile. You should summarize your main results, present the limitations of your study, highlight the implications of your findings, and suggest directions for future research. This is often the shortest chapter in the thesis. Your thesis should have a complete reference list of all the sources you have included in your in-text citations. You should format your reference list according to the style recommended by your institution. Sometimes theses also include appendices. These appendices provide a place for information which, if placed in the main text, would distract the reader from the flow of the argument. Examples of information that can be included in the appendices are ethics approval forms and raw data examples. Not all theses must contain all components described. A notable exception from this format is a thesis with published works. Consult with your supervisors to identify which components you need. It is also important to note that, although these components appear in the order in which they are usually found in a thesis, the chapters may be presented in a different way. Moreover, you are likely to write them in completely different orders. For example, the introduction is often written late so that it can be revised in conjunction with the conclusion, and the abstract is usually written last. Finally, your chapter and section names do not have to be generic. You can choose more descriptive names. When in doubt, always consult your supervisors. Good luck with your research.